very good morning, very good afternoon, evening, depending on where you're joining from, to all of you. Thanks for taking time out and being part of this session. So over the next 20 minutes or so, what we want to look at is basically the Indian tech ecosystem, how it not only survives but continues to thrive in the pandemic era, and what are some of the best practices and what are some of the playbooks and methodologies that are used by some of these organizations in maneuvering, in navigating through the pandemic and coming out stronger on the other side. So what that essentially means from a BCP, from a resilience standpoint, right? So that is essentially what we will focus on. As you're all aware, India has a massive advantage when it comes to natural resources, in terms of human resources, in terms of strength of the ecosystem itself, right? And we, where we stand at a 1.3 billion population, we have that natural advantage with a high level of urbanization and with a two-thirds of our population in the working age. There is automatically an impetus that is always lended to the recovery of the economy and the growth of the economy itself. If you take a step back and look at where India was in the quarter one of 2020, it almost seen a 33% dip in the real GDP of India. But if you look at where we are now and where we are projected to be at the end of Q4, it's almost going to be equal, or if not equal, slightly better than where we were pre-pandemic, right? So this shows that there's strength, there's resilience in the Indian ecosystem that lends that momentum to the economy itself. Similarly, if you look at the other macroeconomic factors that are usually of interest when you look at a country as a demography, if you look at the unemployment rates itself, there was a massive increase in these unemployment rates, specifically in the months of April and May in 2020. But if you look at the numbers now, we are back to pre-pandemic era. So a lot of these data points point towards only one direction, which is basically the fact that India is on the, if not on the path, already sort of has shown signs of complete recovery from the pandemic itself, right? And this is also evidenced by the growing market size of the IT industry itself, which is expected to touch a couple of $100 billion over the next year, by the end of this year itself, with a large part of it still coming from export plus domestic. So what this means essentially is that there's a large Indian populace that is actually consuming these digital services itself, right? And if you look at some of these metrics, what we're trying to show here is essentially there's a massive double-digit growth in some of these metrics that show that there's a native Indian population that's consuming these services and products itself. If you look at, say, the number of internet users, if you look at those who are going out there and purchasing online, actively using e-retail, e-commerce, being part of social media, leveraging internet and the digital technology layer itself, you will see a massive growth there. And the bare minimum that we see is still a positive growth rate itself. So this shows that there's naturally an organic demand that is created because of the large domestic market and the natural tendency of people to increasingly use these interventions that are available at hand for them. And what is fueling this, right? There's a massive supply of what we call as future skills talent pool, right? If you look at the latest NASSCOM report, it says that out of the close to 4.5 million talent tech pool in the country, close to probably 40% is the future skills talent. And when I say future skills, it's digital plus some of the native skills itself, right? And this is expected to grow at a much more higher rate than the overall future skills. So which is going to be a big boost to the talent pool, which is the supply of the talent in the country itself. And a big incoming boost to this would be the landscape of academia and the universities in India. Look at the top universities and the top colleges. There are a lot of these colleges that are actually focusing on specific courses in these future skills itself, and not just your traditional skills. We called out some of the here, but I'm pretty sure there are so many more that are on offer, and not just these logos that we put out there, but also the other colleges that are increasingly adopting specific future ready skill relevant courses itself, right? And how are organizations essentially then leveraging these? There are a whole host of ways where organizations are essentially leveraging some of these institutes. Some of them are, your intuitive research partnerships that you have. Some of them are, leveraging them for sort of a curriculum design and two-way training programs. There's open research, there's innovative combined solutioning that's being used by the Indian organizations, by GCOEs for, leveraging this rich talent that is available in some of these technical universities, and on the other side, sponsoring some of the infrastructure that may influence academia, and therefore bring back a sort of a more future ready talent back to the industry itself, right? So it's sort of a two-way streak. There are advantages that both parties have typically in having these kind of relationships itself. So just sort of touching upon some of the evidence, some of the stories that we've heard in the last year or so where rubber meets the road. We're seeing that there's a whole slew of investments coming into the Indian ecosystem. If you look at some of the names mentioned here, in fact, Sanjay from Braxwell is going to be part of the next session, so he might be able to talk you through the dynamics of setting up an India center in a remote environment, right? That's something very unique. If you look at Tesla, they've committed to a massive investment into the Indian ecosystem. They're setting up a large R&D ops unit in India. They're hiring for the senior leadership from India. Therefore, there's going to be a massive boost, and these companies are only going to continue to scale as we speak, right? They're not here for the short term itself. If you look at some of the service provider organizations like your Infosys, Wipros of the world, they're also increasingly partnering with some of your product and engineering companies. If you look at the recent deal between Rolls-Royce and Infosys, a large part of their engineering capability is being outsourced to Infosys itself, right? And similarly, sticking to automobile, if you look at the Chrysler automobiles in India, they're doing a deal with Wipro specifically for the global digital hub itself, right? So a lot of these data points actually point to the confidence of investors, the confidence of large global multinational corporations in the India ecosystem itself, in the talent of the India ecosystem, which we believe has been truly strengthened in the last 18 months or so, given the way India has been resilient, given the way India has responded, in a sense, to the pandemic itself. They've not only sort of played the supporting role, but they've actually driven some of the BCP initiatives for the, mothership itself. So I think with that note, I think I would want to slightly touch upon the startup ecosystem itself, where some of you may have been reading the news in India. It's 2021 has been, has seen a massive boost in the number of unicorns from India, right? If you look at the total number of unicorns in India right now, it's closed, I think, a 50, and almost half of that has come in the last year and a year and a half, which means that there's so much more investment coming into the Indian ecosystem. There is so much more specific trust in both the Indian ecosystem from the talent standpoint, but also from a market standpoint. If you look at some of these organizations, a large part of their revenue contribution comes from the India market itself. So the large domestic market from India, from APAC, also has a massive advantage, that's being leveraged specifically by these startups to scale. Because only when you scale, you sort of get in the eye of the investors and attract more investments. So these are some of the trends that are, we believe that are strengthening the startup ecosystem, but also driving the growth itself, right? There's a massive, as I said, internet penetration, consumption of digital services that's happening in India, which is pushing a large consumer base to become the target audience for some of these startups. And therefore, there's a massive investor commitment that's happening in India. If you look at 2020 and 2021, there's been almost a double increase in the investments that are coming into India. And some of these investments are in deep tech itself, and deep tech is growing at a very massive rate. Specifically to look at unicorns, as I mentioned, almost a half of the total number of cumulative unicorns in India currently have become unicorns in the last 18 months. And a lot of the global unicorns, which are essentially perhaps organizations that are unicorns but not based out of India are also setting up the technology centers in India, which again is a massive validation of the trust in the talent ecosystem in India itself, right? Uh, and how, what does it mean for the GCO ecosystem itself, right? And when I say GCOEs, it is essentially organizations that have their IT, R&D, and business process management presence in India. We see that a lot of organizations are increasingly setting up their centers in India, and the pandemic hasn't slowed that down at all. If you look at the CAGR, the cumulative, the annual growth rate across the last 4 years and in the last couple of years, that has only seen a positive uptick. Almost 40 plus MNCs have actually set up their centers in India just in 2020 and 21, and a lot of these MNCs include some big names as well, right? As you can see, Rocksool, Tesla, MUFG, and so on. And this has been driven essentially by the play of digital talent, the potential ecosystem maturity where these GCOEs can potentially start up with, partner with startups, partner with other providers, etc. So that has seen a massive uptick in terms of number of GCOEs and the talent that they're employing. If you look at the sheer numbers, it's almost impressive that at that scale it's able to sustain a growth of a positive CAGR year on year. And if you split that across ER&D, IT, and BPM, almost all three of them are seeing a massive increase in growth itself, right? With ER&D being the maximum at close to 10.5% itself, right? So these are some of the specific pointers that we see, from an Indian tech ecosystem standpoint. Just to summarize all of that, I think a lot of organizations are looking at setting up centers in India afresh. Secondary centers are also looking at local market as being one of the key drivers or tools to leverage that scale of growth in India itself. But in the last 18 months, we've seen something which is different, which is slightly unique as well, right? You have your typical digital transformation, agile way of working, etc. Always, in vogue in terms of India centers driving those pieces of initiative. But what has changed is I think there has been a specific focus on a new model the last 18 months where organizations, specifically India centers, are looking at sort of a three-pronged approach to ensuring business continuity, which is resilience, continuity, and efficiency itself. How do you ensure that you provide the flexibility to ensure that your talent is productive, talent is continued and sustained, with a focus on customer experience, with a focus on quality of delivery, etc. Right. So those have been some of the pillars based on which organizations have essentially, I wouldn't say pivoted, but largely looked at a new operating model in addition to the traditional ways of working itself. Just to drive home the point, if you look at some of the measures that organizations in India took just before the pandemic, they've already taken some proactive measures in terms of looking at testing work from home in a systemic way, having certain teams work from home, on certain days of the week, testing out that infrastructure to support that, testing out the digital layer based on which, without compromising on data security and confidentiality of data, how do they ensure that there's collaboration happening not just within the India team project teams, but also between India teams and global teams, from a brainstorming, from a actual solutioning standpoint itself. So a lot of these things were, brought into place as part of policy, not just after, but even proactively, even before the pandemic in some cases, right? Which is like a couple of months before when there were signals that this could be happening in India. So I think that was something which was very key to the way the actual pandemic itself was handled. So you look at what was happening at the peak of the pandemic, there were specific, protocols that were, a lot of organizations obviously, went to complete work from home and looked at some policy changes around how they could leverage technology better to ensure that, the deliveries are not affected, the customer experience is not affected. There were government regulations, infrastructural regulations that had to be adhered to in terms of, being contactless, looking at, how you could arrange transport, how you could arrange movement of infrastructure without there being a significant delay or loss of productivity, I would say, right? In fact, in a lot of our surveys where we spoke to organizations to understand how they've taken the pandemic from a productivity standpoint, a lot of them had actually reported saying there was probably no drop in productivity, or in some cases, one may be slightly higher, more productive than before the pandemic itself, right? So in that sense, there's always an intention to stay ahead of the curve that was driving some of these initiatives itself, right? If you look at the third party risk management, looking at working with vendors, there was always some sort of a monitoring mechanism. There was always some sort of a cadence to understanding how the IP, the knowledge transfer worked, how you could reduce dependencies, how you could manage different vendor relationships, and so on. And all of these things, while they were taken for granted pre-pandemic, were very key during the pandemic and were handled quite well by most of these organizations. So what did organizations learn basis that? Right now, we are almost on the verge of hopefully getting out of this pandemic, and therefore eventually moving to a sustainable long-term working model, right? But we believe that there are changes that are going to be slightly irreversible and perhaps more permanent in nature, right? Where organizations are going to be pivoting to flexible workspaces. They're going to be looking at different models of work where not all of the teams, depending on priority, might be required to come to work. Looking at regulatory policy changes from a long-term perspective that infrastructure, people, process would have to adhere to. Looking at regular vaccine drives, health checkups, and all of those things that are required to ensure that the organizations are shock-proof in the future. Like, touch wood, if something else like this were to happen 3 years down the line, they would just work like Clockwork Orange to ensure that there's nothing that's untoward or it's completely seamless itself, right? So from that perspective, I think it's going to be these changes that are going to be there for the long term itself, and therefore organizations are building these BCP strategies more seriously in terms of looking at, for example, if you look at the metrics that some of these organizations are looking at, they're looking at it in a very systematic way. They're looking at productivity, throughput, absenteeism, attrition, looking at what levels these are at, right? There's always going to be organizations that have some level of productivity drop, attrition, etc., right? But depending on the threshold of each organization, they would probably take a certain plan of action, or they would start to trigger a certain workflow if, say, a productivity drops beyond a 10%. Do I reprioritize work? Do I reprioritize work within teams in my physical facility, or do I reprioritize to another seismic zone, for example? Do I repatriate it outside India temporarily? So there are going to be such difficult, sometimes important decisions that have to be taken in a more scientific way. And organizations are already looking at that. They're setting in practice certain metrics that would help them achieve the end state itself. We just want to talk about an example of one organization. This was a Japanese organizations with an India center, close to 2,200 people strong in India, on the specific things that they did as part of their BCP that helped them, navigate the pandemic better, the effects of the pandemic better itself. See, the organizations initially set up a cross company task force itself, which was acting as a disaster response and management team. And essentially, this team would look at doing drills, look at simulating, actual disaster situations, and understand how they can systemically test their ability to take those shocks, right? And that helped them during, the worst waves of the pandemic itself. And, that sometimes organizations look at a BCP globally. There are things that you can do globally. There are things that you have to localize to a specific location, depending on the ferocity of the pandemic in that particular location, number of people affected, and so on, right? And the government regulations that come along with it. So I think this organization we looked at had all of these points covered specifically, and because of which I think they were able to, navigate through some of the challenges, which was basically, increase in demand, more customer push, looking at how they could still have the organization employees work at a full steam in terms of productivity, in terms of employee engagement itself, right? And how do you ensure that infrastructure dependencies are smooth? How do you ensure that your workplace, if you have to bring folks back in a sort of a phase gated manner, adheres to the regulations without becoming a threat or a risk itself, right? So from a people, process, infrastructure, technology perspective, I think there were a lot of things that this organization did. They use specific digital tools and technologies to ensure that the employees do not get burnt out. There's some level of culture and connect that was still present within the employee base, because a lot of these organizations were dependent on working as teams. So I think this center was able to do that well. They were able to sort of adopt specific technology tools for these areas and solve for them, right? And therefore they were able to come out of the pandemic without any major scratches itself. So that is an example that we just decided to call out, but there are several more examples of India centers that have specifically driven a lot of this these kind of initiatives, perhaps in other locations, in other sort of team sizes itself, and therefore have still done that successfully, right? So just wanted to call that out. While we spoke about how organizations have done BCP well, how they've been resilient, there are also challenges that organizations have faced, right? And we believe that some organizations have been sort of taken aback by the pandemic, and have been caught wanting in some way. So when we spoke to certain organizations and understood what didn't work for them, what they perhaps didn't do well, that couldn't really help them have a very smoothless transition, I think the first thing that we heard was there were no policies or guidelines in place internally for such a situation, right? And therefore the whole thrust upon where do I fall back to, do I have a playbook to go by, all of those pieces were sort of missing or non-existent. From a talent perspective, there was also a lack of engaging in the truest sense with the real with the talent, ensuring that the the morale or the actual motivation levels of the employees within your organizations are actually not dropping, and therefore you're getting the best out of them from a throughput and efficiency standpoint, right? How you communicate, how the leadership communicates with the different rugs of the organization at different levels was very critical. There were some organizations that were not able to track the communication channels problem at the starting or at the right time, and this was essentially very critical in ensuring that there's no panic, there is no knee-jerk reaction that the employees take, right? So very clear, crisp communication with at a regular cadence, with crisp outcomes, with tangible actionables is actually very critical, which organizations sometimes overlook itself, right? And therefore, how do you have a policy that brings together everything? Is there something holistic and robust that you have that is identifying risks at a different level, right? What is your business risk from such a pandemic? What is your infrastructure risk? What is your data risk? Is there a people risk that you have to be mindful about? So all of these things were challenges that organizations were not sometimes able to solve for in entirety or in certain pieces of it itself. And we believe that there are 6 steps that organizations can take to essentially become fit for the future and resist any shocks that they might see of similar nature or even larger intensity going forward, right? The first thing that has to be done is look at policy and program management as a key theme and solve for the outlier and the corner cases itself, right? How do you look at creating playbooks? How do you look at creating SOPs that you can fall back to, right? At least covering 90-95% of the cases where you have specific communication strategies, plans of actions called out itself. And therefore, as part of that, how do you operationalize that? When I say operationalize, it means will you have a task force? Will you have a team and a governance structure in place? And therefore, how would you train those teams? How would you train those folks? Will you simulate real environments? How will you sort of ensure that the team, the org that you're creating around this is able to actually navigate through the pandemic if it happens and when it happens, right? The other point that is very important is looking at different aspects of risk, right? And having specific mitigation plan for each of these risks that we have. And these risks could be not just organization center level risk. These could be business data risk. This could be confident. You might be working with direct customers, so there might be data that will be at play that you might have to sort of cover for from a contingency standpoint. So how do you cover and navigate for that risk? How would you look at all of these? How do you design a solution around this? And therefore, where the rubber meets the road, how do you then implement this, right? What are the metrics that you will measure? How will you look at specific organizational awareness and campaign programs that you will drive down from the top? So I think these are things that are very important for organizations when they look at becoming future ready, and also doing all of this and improving all of this on a continual basis, right? How do you ensure that you are up to date? Like if there's some technology that you're planning to leverage, if that has an impact on the policy, then is your framework robust enough to have that feedback loop modeled in itself, right? So those are important things to consider when you're looking at building a future ready organization. That is pretty much all I had in my talk. I think there's a very interesting talk coming up, a panel coming up, where you're hearing from the actual industry leaders on how they approach some of these problems. Hopefully you found specific takeaways and learnings from the session. Thanks for being a patient audience. Over to you, Sagnik.